without further ado, let's bring on Mr. Mondo Gonzales. Well, you and I have been going back and forth for months and months now on Three Eye Atlas and sharing our thoughts on it. And then with all the stuff coming out with Disclosure, and then recently with this documentary that just came out on Amazon, I watched it. I know you said you've watched it a few times. And this, let's just talk through the audience. I'm assuming there's probably a good portion of the audience that hasn't seen it yet. So just give us a kind of a rundown overview of what it is and what it's about. And then, I can go back and forth on the issues that we found in there.
Yeah, this, if people have been intently following really Disclosure, soft Disclosure from 2017, all the congressional hearings, etc., then I imagine there's not going to be anything too shocking in the film. The film is about an hour and 45 minutes long, came out last Friday. But one of the things that's very powerful about this film is it really highlights from 2017 on, after Lou Elizondo, a very prominent figure in the ATIP program, once he was part of that program from 2007 to 2012, but once he kind of decided, I'm going to step out of government so that I can speak, because he was limited while he was speaking. So once that happened, he started a chain reaction in 2017 that's continued to this day. And so Daniel Farah, who made the film, he chose to document kind of all the big high points from 2017 until just recently. And so he did a phenomenal job. To me, some of the things that we've seen behind the scenes or noted here or there, he was able to interview and bring on camera a dozen to 24 prominent government officials, senators, congressmen, other people in the DOD, DIA. I mean, you just name it, to bring them all together on the record. A couple scientists for sure, PhD scientists, quantum physicists, astrophysicists, talking about all the things that have happened. So the short story is, these whistleblowers and others have come out and have exposed this gap between what is known and then the players, primarily the deep state, known as the legacy program going back to the 40s. So to me, it's all nice and tight, very well done. There's going to be, I think, some shocking things in there for Christians. This is why I think it's important, Pete, that we talk about it, because, I spent a lot of time as a pastor, and my heart really is for the church. It's for the person in the pew, to equip them to, number one, engage evangelistically with those, but also to have biblical answers. Because I think, and they bring up religion, which we could talk about in the film a couple times. And at first, it doesn't come off as being very friendly, but I think we can unpack it a little bit. But I think Christians are going to need to spend some time thinking through this, not only with what the data is at face value, which might not all be true, but face value, and then what the Bible says.
Yeah, I think that surprised me is, when Lou Elizondo was, when he, at the kind of toward the beginning where he was talking about some of the biggest pushback they got during his time in there with the Pentagon was the, what he said they were the
religious fundamentalists.
Yeah, religious fundamentalists. And so, it's talking about Christians. Yeah. Because they kept just saying, no, those are demons. You guys are you're playing with the devil, trying to open this stuff up. And I want to tie this idea here kind of, we can talk about it later too, but I want to tie this in with kind of the same type of pushback that you see from the naturalist and the secularist with regard to Three Eye Atlas and maybe with some aspects of NASA and stuff, where they absolutely refuse to believe there's anything but just some kind of natural explanation for. So I think there's those extremes. On one side, you have maybe religious fundamentalists on one side, and the other side, you have pure secular fundamentalists on the other. And there's no wiggle room for them on. It's always just black or white, one or the other. And but I think what it's interesting to me. So the first thing that take away from this was that a lot of the people that he has in there that are, first of all, he's got some of the most credible witnesses, incredible people involved in this program. I mean, here's like some of the names I pulled off of there. So obviously Lou Elizondo, long time in the military, and then head up ATIP. You have Jay Stratton, who was a Navy intelligence, and then he's some big wig at the DIA. Hal Puthoff, who was a PhD in quantum scientist, ATIP, and chief scientist for ATIP. Eric Davis, PhD, astrophysicist, scientific advisor for ATIP. Dr. Gary Nolan, Stanford University School of Medicine, who was also with CIA and ATIP. Travis Taylor, PhD, quantum physicist. You had politicians, you had Democrats, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator Schumer, Harry Reid when he was still alive. And then, this is a little bit dated because at the time it was still Senator Marco Rubio, who we know now is Secretary of State. And then you have congressmen like Dan Crenshaw, Mike Gallagher, and then Senator Mike Rounds. And then with the military, Rear Admiral Tim, I can't say his last name, Gallaudet or whatever. He's the U.S. Navy Chief Oceanographer. Mike Flaherty, UAP Task Force. Colonel James Cobb, NORAD, U.S. Air Force. Commander David Fravor, who's been all over all these disclosure hearings and stuff as an eyewitness. He was one of the fighter pilots that saw the Tic Tac aircraft there flying. And then Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich, she was also one of those pilots. Lieutenant Riot Graves, a fighter pilot. Christopher Mellon, Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. And so, I mean, in terms of like a documentary, he had probably the all-star cast of people, right? And then also at the time, James Clapper. Mm-hmm. And it's funny to me how a lot of these guys now, like Clapper and others, are all embroiled in like the political intrigue surrounding what was the operation to try and discredit Trump?
Russiagate.
Yeah, Russia. Some of these guys were all up in Russiagate and stuff, so now they're dealing with other stuff. But that to me was the it comes out and boom, it hits you with all these people with just impeccable credibility, right off the bat. So if you're just somebody watching it as a casual observer and you're thinking, wow, you've got politicians, you've got military leaders, you've got folks way up into the scientific communities as well as oceanography and all these other kind of specialized fields, they're all saying the same thing. It leads you to believe that there is stuff going on that we can't explain. And so I applaud the documentary for at least coming out with that, that's like this opening salvo. I think, but what turned me off also was that initial statement by Lou Elizondo about how much pushback they got from the religious side of the Pentagon, or religious leaders within the Pentagon talking about these are really just demons. And so let me ask you this right off the bat, because I know that even within our community, there's a wide range of beliefs. I tend to believe in more of just the angels and demons type of aspect. But if you go with somebody like Timothy Alberino or L.A. Marzulli and others, there might be shades of gray in there, no pun intended, but shades of gray inside of the what the fallen angels could have created in terms of non-human life forms, whatever. So where do you stand in all of this?
That's I think, man, that's kind of I have a very strong opinion on it, but this is what I would say is that, I do think I'll answer you in a second. Okay. Because I'll just give some background in that I can understand why, when Lou Elizondo said what he said, I went back and listened to it a few times, and then later it came up again, and I could see that he, where he was coming from, because I think as a pastor, I can give you an example. I was in Vegas last week, and I was with Billy Crone. We were doing some other things, and I spoke at his church, blah, blah, blah. But I was with some people that are very traditional church people. And we were talking about this, and the comment was, well, clearly there's no other beings in the universe. And I said, oh, really? Well, why is that? And I'm not committed. I was asking questions. And it was like, well, because clearly if God created other beings in the universe, he would have told us. And I go, really? So now God's required to tell us all of his plans? I said, think about the logic there, because Deuteronomy 29:29 says the secret things belong to the Lord, and the things that he has revealed to us. So in my mind, I look at it as a mix of a whole bunch of things, because biblically speaking, I think that we have Christians in general. It's just easy for us to throw it's demonic on a label on it, or it's fallen angels. But I say, well, what does that really mean? Let's unpack that, and let's see what the Bible says and what it doesn't say about these things, because sometimes we might say, oh, that's demonic, but what we really mean is, well, that's evil, because you might have a poltergeist situation, because demons aren't physical. Demons are only spiritual in the Bible. They seek to possess. They're disembodied. They're unclean spirits. Now, angels, I actually consider angels as being physical. And so, and again, I can show some of that scripturally, but this is what I think Christians will have a hard time with is, wait a minute, because right in the beginning, they say that they did this little montage. We're not alone. We're not alone. We're not alone. We're not alone. We're not alone in the universe. And so obviously as Christians, we know we're not alone. We know that there's God's there, and there's cherubim, there's seraphim, there's the whole unseen realm, all the different hierarchy in the Old Testament and New Testament of non-human beings. Okay, whatever, again, cherubim, seraphim, angels, shadim, you name it. We can go through all of it. So we know that. So the question that is, but what they also said, which I think is going to be hard, I think, for some Christians, and this is, I think, what Lou Elizondo was kind of disappointed in, is you have physical craft, and over, physical biologicals. Okay. Well, a biological physical being is not a demon. Okay. So then the question, what is it? So if we take it at face value that everything they said is true, that you have nuts and bolts craft, you can't just say that's all spiritual and demonic, because that's the opposite of that. I think that's what he was responding to, is that in his worldview, you have all these people coming out saying, no, there's a body right there. It's a biological body. It was living and breathing. There's a craft there. But these guys over here that are supposedly Christian fundamentalist extremists are simply saying you're only playing with demons. And I think that's a disconnect. For him, he's thinking, how are you, what? Why are you trumping, even though I think theology is more accurate, but I think that's an improper theological understanding. So that's how I would say, in my mind, where am I at? I think that if I take it, that there's biologics and hard craft, these are physical craft and not just lights in the sky, how can I interact with that scripturally? And I actually think that we can.
Yeah. And I just earlier today, I was watching a program with, I don't know if you know, Hugh Ross. He's an
astronomer. Sure.
And so he is very much of the mind that these are all simply spirit craft or spiritual machines, whatever, that because they don't obey the laws of physics of our universe, although some of the stuff that Lou talks about, the categories that he has, but I'm thinking too that we don't fully understand. I don't know if I agree with him all the way on that, because I don't know if we fully understand the what the technological abilities of the demonic realm are, what they can craft. We know that they can manifest into physical bodies, or at least fallen angels can manifest into physical bodies.
Mm-hmm. Clearly.
So who's to say that they can't manipulate material to also perform at some type of level? And whether these things have a plasma shield around them that allows them to become transmedium craft or whatever, or they are purely just spiritual machines, or like with Elijah, the chariots of fire, the chariots that separated him, that he ends up getting caught up. Are those chariots physical chariots? Do they have any type of material quality to them, or they are purely as ethereal or spiritual type of material that are, God allows us to see them from time to time, but they don't have a physical form or a physical weight or mass to them. Does that make sense? Or is that?
Well, you're bringing up all the right questions, because I think that, L.A. Marzulli and he's going to have a conference on this next month. And one of the things I'm going to do is kind of give a review of the movie, but also give some of the technological aspects of what we see in the Bible and unpack it, because there's some interesting stuff there, as you mentioned. I'll give you an example. Is I think we have a hard time when we say something is spiritual, or you mentioned ethereal. Those are good words. And you go, well, wait a minute. Is that the opposite of physical or tangible? And so, for example, if we look at Jesus as an example, now granted, Jesus might be unique. So maybe let's take Jesus out of it, but we could use Jesus in his glorified body. He said, I'm flesh and bone, give me something to eat. Okay. I'm not a spirit. But he can materialize and dematerialize as we see. You look at angels, same thing. They're eating in Genesis 18 and 19. They're there, but they materialize and they dematerialize, but yet they're eating, they're physical. So it's interesting to me that I think, going back to Hugh Ross, he says, well, they don't obey the laws of physics. The laws of physics as we currently understand it, Hugh. I mean, come on, you're a doctor, you're an astrophysicist. So we have all understanding of physics. We clearly don't. So This is the key in the film. And this goes back to Bob Lazar, his claims in the 1980s, where he's working on these crafts and he's trying to reverse engineer them. He's talking about these things, which he's been vindicated. So I think we're dealing with physics that is beyond what we currently understand, Dr. Ross. Okay. So, but in that sense, one of the things that I find interesting is the nature of physicality, that you have angels showing up and again materializing. And here's a good example. We talk about, you use the word manipulation, which I think is helpful. So, for example, we believe the Bible is very literal. So I'm going to give two examples. One of them is, we know in the book of Exodus, you have this complete occult center in Egypt. Okay. Well, it's completely powerful. God was saying, let's go, let's have a little battle. He's going to judge the gods of Egypt. Well, Moses throws down his rod, his wooden staff, it becomes a stake. Well, God's power, that's awesome. Okay. But then the Egyptians do the same thing. So somehow Satan was able to manipulate this piece of wood, which was a staff, turned it into a living snake and manipulated it somehow. And God's snake ate their snake. Okay. But some Christians are really uncomfortable with that. And they're like, wow, it's figurative. It was just simply good and evil. No, I believe it's literal. I believe there's no reason not to accept it. The second thing I would give an example is, well, you can give two examples in Job 1 and 2. Satan is given control over not to touch Job. But what does Satan do? He goes out there, he creates a whirlwind, he creates a tornado. He's manipulating real physical matter in order to accomplish what he's doing. And the second thing is when God says, okay, you can touch Job, but you're not allowed to kill him. Well, he goes in and somehow he manipulates Job's body. What's there, fashions it, formulates it, manipulates it to change it to boils. So This isn't just spiritual mumbo jumbo. Their abilities, when given permission, have great power, much more than we can understand. And these aren't just, we can't just throw a spiritual label on it. This is real physical manipulation. So to me, when we look at all these, there's other scenarios too, but this should help shape us like, this is physical. It's not just spiritual out there that's non-tangible.
Yeah, he said a couple things that I agreed with, and in a couple of things I was like, well, that's not really 100% the way I think things are going down. Some of the things that he said that I did tend to agree with was that when you have places that are where there's a rise in occultic activity, you start to see these types of things manifesting a lot more frequently. And I think that I do think there's a correlation between the occult or people trying to tap into demonic spirits, entities, whatever, and the appearance of these things, as well as when there's not hardly any occult activity, tend not to see a lot of it out there. But I know there's exceptions to all this, because you can go back all through the 1940s and the 1950s and beyond into small rural town, Kentucky, or, Hopkinsville or other places where these things appear, and there's these pretty credible stories coming out of, Hopkinsville is a good one. But it seems like there is a correlation with the example of like sleep paralysis and stuff like that, where we don't know. All we hear is like the story of somebody that's experiencing sleep paralysis, or they feel like they've been abducted or whatever. I think some of the stuff we aren't privy to are those people playing with Ouija boards, tarot cards? Are they involved in any type of occult activity beyond what they're sharing with the researchers or whatever? So I think there's probably stuff going on in the background we aren't privy to, and we probably will never know. But it does seem like there is a correlation. Do you think there's a correlation between the occult and the appearance of these things? Or
Well, 100%. Now, we can't say that it's without exception, because obviously there's some people that are minding their own business and they see a UFO or something. So that's not always the case. However, what you will see is in many of the ufologists who've been looking at this for a long time, who happen to be Christian born-again believers, they will often note in their investigations that many of these people were into the occult, 100%. And so they also will, even some of the stuff that David Paulides has done in, Missing 411, he's, as far as I know, he's not a Christian, as far as I know, but he talks a lot about how there'll be UFOs connected with Bigfoot and other paranormal stuff that happens. You look at like Skinwalker Ranch, some of the testimonies that have come out of there where it's very occultic, and yet you have some of the, again, very paranormal stuff. And again, David Paulides, like, I can't believe how many UFO sightings are connected with Bigfoot. It's the strangest thing. He didn't really understand why there would even possibly be a connection there, but he found that there was very much some of that stuff. So as I think, as we're talking, there's no doubt there can be a connection. It can lure in for, if you look at, for example, Stephen Greer, Mr. Seance, New Age guy himself.
Yeah.
He believes they're all friendlies. These guys are just our friends, and so he goes out and he calls them down, and yet he has these seances type things, and yet they'll come and they'll show up. So he's playing with fire.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was one thing that he had said that I thought there was probably some truth to that. Another one he said was that, well, the one that he said that I disagree with is that he's like, well, if you're talking about a ship that has to travel from another planet, the size of that ship would have to be the size of the Death Star because of just the distance that's traveled from the nearest, inhabitable planet. So the thing that he says something that I agree with, and it's something I disagree with. The thing that he said that I agreed with was, if you look at the type of deception that when these people are communicating close encounters of the third kind or whatever with these beings, if you go back 100 years, 120 years, and you go back to the earliest accounts where people are doing like automatic writing, or they're somehow channeling these beings or whatever, they're saying initially they said they were from the far side of the moon.
Yeah.
And then as technology goes along, we're able to send people to the moon. No, we're from Venus. And then we know you can't really be from Venus. The temperatures there would be just astronomically, you couldn't even live there. So then it changed to Mars. So I think that ties in with something that Tim Chaffee had written in his book, Fallen, the Sons of God and the Nephilim. He said that, and this has stuck with me over the years, that the deception that we see is always kind of proportionate to the level of technology at the time. So if you're in the Middle Ages, what's supernatural there is werewolves and vampires and witches. And that's something that people can kind of grasp onto and fear because it's something that makes sense to them in their world that they live in. But as time moves forward and technology becomes more and more advanced, the level of deception has to increase as well. And, I would make the exception with like Bigfoot, for example, because we've had trail cams out, we've got satellites, we've got people hunting these things day and night. And they seem to just always manage to avoid the right camera angle, the trail cam, whatever. And people, all they get is like the blurry images. So somehow that's not how natural, animals, primates, or whatever would live. I mean, they're pretty much They don't even pay attention to that stuff until it becomes like a distraction for them or something. But like, they don't, as far as like a trail cam capturing a picture of a bear or a deer or whatever, they're like, whatever, we're just going to eat the food that's there. But a Bigfoot somehow manages to avoid all the camera angles that it could possibly capture it in, but it still reaches in and grabs the food or makes sounds or whatever. So there's this level of intelligence that's beyond anything in the animal world. But so that's one thing that he said that I agree with in terms of the level of deception seems to be changing with the times. The thing that he said that I disagreed with was something that goes back to what Lou Elizondo talked about in Disclosure, talking about how can the government keep something this big so secret for so long. And he mentions the Watergate as an example of how we couldn't even keep one cassette tape, secret for more than like 12 days or whatever. Well, and he goes, you're talking about these massive ships and stuff. So the way Lou Elizondo broke it down was that you have, in terms of the legacy gatekeepers, in terms of all this knowledge, you have the CIA as kind of the brains of the operation. They kind of are the overarching control over how these things are hidden, etc. You have the U.S. Air Force that serves as the muscle that goes out and does the aircraft crash retrieval stuff, and they police up the area, make sure that there's no signs of a crash or anything like that. They bring that back, and then that goes into the contractors, and whether you're talking about Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, I don't know. I don't know all the different contract groups that are involved with this, but they're back and they're trying to reverse engineer the technology that they discovered. And then you have the Department of Energy, which deals with anything that has radioactive material, nuclear material. But the big thing about DOE is they've got their own classification system. So they're not subject to Congress or any of these other kinds of
FOIA requests, etc., disclosure programs. So all four of those entities serve as kind of the legacy gatekeepers for all this information. And I know for a fact that if you can keep things so compartmentalized where the left hand really doesn't know what the right hand's doing, that's one way you can keep something secret for a long period of time. But I guess, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's possible that we can keep secrets this long? I mean, obviously we've kept JFK secret, the whole truth behind JFK, that we kept that secret for 50 years? Yeah. I mean, 1963 is a long time ago. And one of the things that's interesting is this comes up in the film, and the one PhD scientist, he said, look, he was the quantum physicist. He goes, people say you can't keep a secret. He goes, I'll tell you what, right now. He goes, I know things that are classified that I'm not talking about those things today. And I can tell you 100% that it's been kept secret. So I know, he goes, I know a lot of secrets myself. This is what I can talk about to a certain limited degree, but the other ones that I've been a part of, I can't. So he said, the idea that it hasn't happened or couldn't happen is simply just false. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of things within our government. And the other thing that we recognize is, again, the whole FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act requests. I mean, that's relatively recent in the sense of a law. Somebody can tell us what the law is, maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago, but it wasn't 50 years ago. And so when you see, as you mentioned, the CIA and the other government agencies begin to internalize by their classification systems, as you mentioned, the Department of Energy, and then internalize it into the defense contractors. That was just brilliant. It was genius, because now all that stuff is in there. And even this is just what we're allowed to see. Let's take what we are allowed to see, and the people, these experts, as you listed them out earlier, these very credible individuals, very well experienced. I mean, decades and decades. These aren't newbies coming out with the information that they can share. Even Lou Elizondo said, look, there's some things I can't share because I'll go to jail, but I can tell you what I can. So the fact that you have all these credible people saying what they said, and that's maybe 0.1%. So that tells you automatically that 99% of it is still kept in the shadows.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating to me too, is that when you think about this level of how things are compartmentalized and shielded from the public writ large, but also shielded from the government within the government itself, The current classification system that we have began under Eisenhower in 1953. My understanding is correct. But the reason that even before that, I mean, you got to think about it. At the end of World War II, as the Allied forces began making their way into Berlin, into the SS strongholds and places like that, they began to uncover this treasure trove of just information on human testing, on all of the stuff that they've been delving into with the occult and Aryan theology and trying to tap into the power of the dark sun, black sun, and all that kind of stuff. Hitler toward the end, I think, was getting very desperate, trying to reach out to anything that was going to help save the fight. And so as we began to uncover all this stuff, I mean, there had to be a way to. I'm just trying to put myself back in the mindset of an army officer back then, an intelligence officer back then. What do you do with all this information, especially like on all the like the human testing they did in concentration camps and things like that? So a lot of what we know is that, for example, within the Army intelligence, the information on human testing that came out of that immediately got not classified, but closed off. And then the OSS got turned into the CIA. Mm-hmm. And then very quickly, I think they safeguarded a lot of that information. And now that stuff became classified. And some of that stuff went into what we would later know as the MK Ultra, with the Nazis, they were experimenting with truth serum, or they were trying to create a truth serum. But what they were really using was LSD. And so, but the CIA took that and they basically created a whole new program under a classified program called MK Ultra, which they later on, that wasn't even declassified until not declassified, but discovered until the 1970s. So that was hidden for about a good 20 years. Mm-hmm. Operation Midnight, I think it was called Midnight Climax or something. There was a bunch of different classified programs that they were doing, experimenting with drugs and mind control, etc. And so we know that they had the ability to hide that for a good 20, 25 years.
Yep.
So I have no doubt in my mind that their government is capable of classifying these things for a considerable amount of time, especially when you think about ARPA, DARPA, and all the different cutting edge technology stuff that we have out there. I mean, there's stuff that, and this is kind of an example I've used over the years, but when I was in the Directorate of Combat Doctrine and Development, which it goes by the acronym DCDD for the Army Medical Department, nobody could even tell me. I was getting assigned to this job, and nobody can even tell me what it was until I got there and actually started doing it. And then they were like, well, we plan 20 years into the future. So we were looking at the Google Watch. We were looking like at the prototype of like a Google Watch or a Fitbit 5 or 6 years before it ever came out. And, the goal of it was, we were looking at it from like an operational mindset, like, what can soldiers wear in some village in Afghanistan that us back here in the Tactical Operations Center can watch them on a computer screen? We can watch their little icons, and it'll tell us what their heartbeat is, their perspiration level, hydration level, all of that stuff, whether they're killed, they're alive. And they wanted something that soldiers could wear. So we were looking at it from that aspect, not looking at it from like, how many steps have I taken today or anything like that. But you could see that there's whatever technology there is, there's always going to be the military application is going to be looked at first to see if there is some kind of way that they could use that, harness that for a military edge, a strategic edge. So I know that if I'm in regular Army and we're looking at stuff like that 5 years into the future, DARPA and those guys are like way out there. I mean, I'm sure I'm already convinced that they have artificial superintelligence. I think they already have it. It's probably completely offline from any kind of network systems or anything like that. They've got it like in a closed network, or they have some type of quantum supremacy, and it's just not released to the larger, world because of the ramifications it would, the things it would cause. But let's talk about some of the aspects of that Lou Elizondo in this documentary talked about, called the observables. And these are the observables that he said are what distinguish what we're seeing from anything that mankind currently has, and I'm talking about the Americans, Chinese, the Russians, like nobody has this type of craft that can do this stuff. One of them is the first aspect of it was the hypersonic velocity. And so one of the examples was the fastest human aircraft that we have right now can only travel at 4,600 miles per hour, because they were tracking things that were going as fast as 40,000 miles per hour.
So let's bring it up a notch too, that oftentimes, again, I'm not picking on any Christian extremist or fundamentalist, okay, because I consider myself one of those in some regard, but in their mind, they're like, and this is the key. Originally, it was, it's just lights in the sky. So demons are up there, and a light can move here, and a demon can move here, and so they're just manipulating a light. Well, we know that's not true now. Why? Because one of the things that's been well documented is these craft, not just lights, these craft are being picked up on advanced sensors that deal with things that are physical, whether it's radar, could be a long aperture radar, could be UV, infrared, you name it. These things are being picked up. They're physical things. And so that's really important. And so going back to, again, what Hugh Ross said is, only demons can, beat the laws of physics. Well, again, known laws of physics. So in this regard, what these crafts are doing, simply talking about G-force, that comes up certainly in the film, is well known, that these pilots who are, as you mentioned, several of them, they're talking about the G-forces that they've experienced, accelerating from 0 to 200 miles an hour, and going, when you get so far, your organs start ripping apart. So you can't, it's really painful to travel at these speeds. So, and that's at the fastest would be 4,600. I thought was really interesting too, that Elizondo was saying that when you look at, maybe it was the Blackbird or something like that, where it's traveling at 4,000 miles an hour, and it requires the entire half of the state of Ohio just to make its turn and to come around, because it's going that fast. Where these things, boom, boom, boom. But at the end of the documentary, they discuss, some potentials. These guys are astrophysics, they're quantum physicists, so they're talking in language such as energy fields and bubbles. 1,100 billion watts of energy, which is 100 times the daily output of the United States, being used in these reactors that can then power this energy field, which of course we can get into some of the problems that it's caused, physical problems that people have, medical injuries, which, Gary Nolan was recruited to discuss that. So the fact of the matter is, when you look at the hypervelocity, the instantaneous acceleration, you look and you go, okay, something's happening there, being recognized from these physical sensors by advanced aircraft. I will say this, just so it's put out there, one of the things that was interesting that they brought up was when ATIP was looking, and Arrow was looking for documented reports, the Navy provided almost all of the reports of their pilots, where the U.S. Air Force, who is in that CIA, like you said, the operational side of it, they provided none. We don't have anything to share. Oh, really? So when you look at this, number one, let's not deny that it's physical. Let's not just throw a demon label on it or spiritual, but it's operating with the laws of physics that we don't currently understand. But I think they don't violate the laws of physics, because again, when you look at quantum physics, or even advanced theoretical physics, it fits within that framework for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to me that the known laws, clearly what we know now is far different than what we knew in, 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago beyond. So as we continue on, especially as we delve into quantum mechanics and quantum, through quantum computing and in theory, I honestly think that quantum is going to play a huge role to play in the world of Revelation 13.
Agreed.
In that 70th week time period. I think that part of, and I've shared this quite a bit, but like we know in 2 Thessalonians 2, 7, and 8, that the restrainer has to be removed first in order for the Antichrist to be revealed. Well, I think that the restraining ministry of the Holy Spirit is, like I like to, because the Holy Spirit's omnipresent. The Holy Spirit's everywhere. And the Holy Spirit was on the earth in Acts chapter 1, just as he was given to the earth in Acts chapter 2. But the restraining ministry of the Holy Spirit is not just restraining evil writ large, but it's also restraining mankind from advancing too quickly in certain fields of technology and in sciences and things like that. And that's why I think we see every generation, you get a guy like an Einstein, or you get a guy like Tesla, or you get a guy like even Musk, or somebody that comes along and they just seem to understand things in a completely unique way that opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. But it's not, common knowledge across the board. It's, usually one or two individuals who has this, they're using all of their brain or something. I don't know what it is, but God has kind of paced mankind. And so if you look at the history of mankind, at least from the flood forward, mankind was pretty much limited to the speed of horse, or the speed of a sailboat. And it wasn't until just the last 125 years or so that mankind, rapidly advanced. We've had more advances in technology in the last 125 years than pretty much the last 4,000 years.
Yeah.
Combined, so it really, going from the Wright brothers in 1903 to Armstrong on the moon in 1969, and 66 years. I mean, think about how fast technology has changed in that period of time. And it's changing even faster now. So, but I do think we're going to plateau until the time of the rapture. And then after that, I think the safeguards are off, the guardrails are removed. And mankind is going to race forward in a way that is unparalleled to anything we've seen today. So, I guess I was going to talk about this with regard to the instantaneous acceleration. That was another one of the observables, is that we don't have anything that can go from a complete standstill, maybe a Harrier jet, but even still, I mean, you're still talking about, or an Osprey, being able to go stationary in the air to just instantaneously take off. We don't have anything like that. And so you've seen that video of the UFO in Jerusalem. I think it's pretty well known. It's been out forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it just shoots up so fast that your mind's still trying to process, wait, did I just see what I thought I saw? So on. But yeah, and there's video after video after video after video of these things moving so fast across the horizon. It really just defies our understanding of reality, and not just in the United States. I mean, you're talking about in South America, in Europe, all over the world. People are seeing these things that are just, some are flying by cockpits of the planes, or just boom, whizzing by, or they're flying by a drone, or they're just, somebody's filming the horizon and they don't even know they capture it until later when they're looking at the film, like, what is this blip going across? And it goes from one side of the horizon to the other in just a matter of like a second or two. And there's nothing that we have that moves that fast or can take off that quickly. So I guess for me, it seems, in my mind, it defies the laws of physics, but maybe it's just the laws of physics as we understand them. So
100%. The other thing too is you'll hear people say, well, those were just satellites. Well, I can tell you what, I live with the bane of satellites for astrophotography, and they are very slow moving, very linear. I mean, going across, some of them will go and blink out because they get to a certain point where they're not reflecting the sun's light anymore. You'll often see satellites again early after sunset or sunrise, because that's when the sun is visible. So it's pretty rare that you'll see a satellite at 2 a.m, just because, again, the sun is on the other side, and so it has nothing to reflect. So that is not the case at all. And again, satellites are very slow and very periodic. These things, again, the instantaneous acceleration in the film talking about going from sea level to 12,000 feet in 2 seconds, just because it could, and or zipping right by a whole formation of F-15s or F-35s, and again, just because it could. So that's the key in all this. You have you have. Let me just say it this way: one of the things that if people look, and I give a lot of credibility, not all credibility for sure, but to Bob Lazar, talking what he talked about in the 1980s, where it goes back to our conversation where when he went to, basically down to Area 51, S4, that area, Groom Lake, he's in there and his job was to try to look at this craft and the reactor, or, the reactor to see the energy, how it was producing its energy. And he said, when I would talk to people, I was not allowed, like you couldn't talk to anybody else. There was no departments talking to one another. It was all isolated. But he talked about the way that the reactor would work, having this energy field where it's creating its own gravitational field all at once. And so it's not even violating, it's not violating physics because it has its own things within its bubble. And so you see many of the reports of maybe a ship inside a bubble. And in fact, some of the new radar that was shown in the film that just came out, when they zoom in on the actual object, you can see the field around it. It's pretty fascinating. And the one physicist guy said the previous sensors that we had, they weren't sophisticated enough, where you could see, but now that we can, not only can we see the object, but we can see the field around it, which this is why you come up with these new, the new terminology, transmedium, unidentified submerged object, where they're going into water or they're going from space into our atmosphere down into water, because it's not making waves. It doesn't need to. Everything's being wrapped around it. This is also one of the things that causes, he was saying, this is why sometimes you don't get a good image, because the light is being wrapped around it, where they could, and this is where you go, if they wanted, this is where they can blink out. They can just, because they can wrap all the light that would be going off of it. It just wraps around it. There's many ways of seeing that within physics as well. Even in known physics, you can see that. So I look at all these things and I go, we're dealing with advanced understanding, which let me throw this out there. We know that the angelic realm, God's realm, again, I think that these are creatures. These are non-hybrid creatures of God. That some are good, some are bad. Extremely intelligent. You have thousands upon thousands and millions upon millions, according to the Bible, and they weren't born on earth. We were born out of the dust. And so they have a higher level of being than us and intelligence. And so it's interesting to me that I'll say this, and this is where we can ask a question. Biblically, we know in the book of Daniel that it talks about this angelic being flying from here to there. But there's no evidence anywhere in the Bible that angels have wings. Now, the cherubim have wings. Those are the guardian thrones, but they're never called angels. The seraphim and the cherubim, those are the ones that are the living creatures. They're shown. But angels, Michael, none of them are ever talked about. So, but in our minds, we're thinking, oh, he was flapping his wings when he flew. Okay, that's just not biblical. So when it says that they flew, how did they fly? Could it be in a craft? Like, again, Ezekiel's wheels in Ezekiel 1. So we get these little hints of things. It talks about God's chariots are 10,000 of 10,000. So are these craft that are able to cloak themselves, but they're tangible and physical? Again, it's been well known. I'll just end it here. Gary Stearman talks about his flight from Kansas City down to Dallas, and UFOs escorting him. And he said it was good. It was a good UFO. Now, maybe he's just deceived, but there's nothing that would prohibit the idea that every craft that we see couldn't be one of the good guys in that sense. And so in my mind, I'm looking at the scripture and I see descriptions of flying. I see descriptions of in the Hebrew language, which is very limited, of chariots and other things, which the word the word in Hebrew is this idea of rekev. It's simply we get the word in modern Hebrew. You talk about merkava, which is a tank, but the word rekev is simply a vehicle. A vehicle. The broadest word is a vehicle that moves from this point to that point. And so oftentimes it's translated as chariot, but it can refer to any kind of vehicle that goes from this point, a vehicle that takes somebody up and moves them from this point to that point. I just find it very interesting.
Yeah, well, you touched on some of the other observables that in terms of being transmedium, something that can transport itself from space through our atmosphere, through water, never losing velocity. I think they've tracked things as large as like 2 football fields underneath the ocean, moving at speeds of like 400 miles an hour. I mean, there's not even torpedoes that we have that move that fast underwater. They've got credible video of somewhere off Puerto Rico. I think they showed that they were showing that video clip of that, whatever that craft was that was flying at this crazy rate of speed, and then it just goes in the water, no splash of water, and you could still track it under the water, and it wasn't slowing down, and then it comes back out of the water. So I guess my my thoughts on this are that if I think you and I would both agree that we don't believe in aliens in the Stephen Greer sense of the word, like there's little gray men, from other planets or whatever. Are these, you think, could these be demonic entities or creations of these demonic entities in the sense of, I know they don't create things per se, but like in the same vein that the Nephilim were the mixture of the hybrid mixture between fallen angels and human women, could they have created some type of non-human entity for the purposes of deception that now we find as the remnants of like these biological discoveries in these crashed aircraft or whatever, that we're allowed to find these things? And I don't think they're dumb, and I don't think that they crashed because of weather or because they forgot to change the oil or something in their aircraft. I think they're allowing us to find these things to perpetuate a form of deception. Is that you think an acceptable?
Yeah, because a couple things. I would say that theoretically, the Bible is silent on whether there are other created beings in the other part of our galaxy or whatever. I mean, I don't think we can outlaw it. I don't think we can say it's true because the Bible's silent. So any arguments is going to be argument for silence. It doesn't violate. If God created something out there, he certainly could. I'm not saying Jesus died for them. He only died on earth. But if he did, again, I can't rule it out. But I can't argue for it either. So it's a silent argument. But going back to the other thing though, is when, like the guy in the film, he said that he's aware of at least 2 types of biological species. Okay. Well, that creates, these are biological, they're physical, they're tangible. Where'd they come from? So what we do see though is, what do we know? Well, we know that in Genesis 6, you have angels coming down, at least mating with human women and producing these hybrids, these half human, half something else, biological beings. Okay. In the same way, could it be that these fallen angels are also doing something similar in the modern world where they're creating? Maybe we haven't even talked about the abduction phenomena, which is very deep. Cattle mutilations, that's another very interesting thing in all this. FBI investigated it way back in the 80s and 90s, and then they could never solve it. But so these are real things. The question then is, are they breeding these, what often people would say a gray for their own purpose? Some people call them meat suits. I'm a little skeptical of that. And that demons are simply just, because demons don't have any physical corporeal nature, so they're just indwelling the meat suit. I don't know, that's hard for me. I guess it's not impossible conjecture, but so I think going back to what you said is, are they creating these or breeding them the fallen angels who are using them, I do think ultimately, no doubt, this is part of the deception, because as you mentioned earlier, when the restrainers removed, the very nature of the 70th week of Daniel is described as the great delusion. And so not only that, but the Matthew 24:4, the first thing Jesus warned about in that time period is let no one deceive you. And so if you look in Revelation, whether it's Revelation 12, Revelation 20, it describes Satan as the dragon, as the serpent who deceives the nations. So there's no doubt this entire time period is supernatural. Revelation 13, all power. Think about that in 2 Thessalonians 2. The man of sin, when he arrives, he comes with all power. It's within God's providence, okay? But God is allowing it to create this deception. So I don't think we even can conceive of what the 70th week is truly going to be based on all the descriptions.
Yeah, it reminds me of the passage in Revelation 16, I think it's 13 or 14, and I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. They are spirits of demons. It doesn't say they're demons; it says they're the spirits of demons. But the frog-like thing is what captured my attention, that they look like frogs. And so when you talk about little gray men and stuff like that, they always kind of have that reptilian type of amphibious appearance to them or whatever. So, I think if, I look at it like this, if Satan understands if he does nothing, his fate is in the lake of fire, and he is going to be forever and ever tormented. And he is doing whatever he can do, whatever God's going to allow him, whatever wiggle room he has to try and deceive mankind. Yeah, who knows what he's allowed to do. We just know that there's a certain level that he cannot go beyond right now. And that once the rapture takes place and the restraining ministry of the Holy Spirit removes that restraint from the earth, then, like you said there in the 2 Thessalonians 2, all power, lying signs, and wonders is going to be at its disposal. So I guess that begs the question now, why now? Why now? Why all the disclosure now? Why the ramp up of the everything that we're seeing now with regard to the spacecraft, with the biologicals, with all the stuff that's happening? So why do you think it's now rather than say 20 years ago or 30 years ago or sometime in the past? It's been around since 47, at least, since Roswell. So
yep. And it's interesting because one of the things that you look at is you look at, again, 1945, a nuclear bomb is dropped. 47 is Roswell. 48, Israel comes into existence. And then you have all of this time of preparation, from 77 years ago. And then, so why now? Well, the time is getting shorter. I think there's no doubt if you go back, there's always been ufology, right? And that's why the ufologists are like, hey, there's nothing in this film that's new to me. That they've been able to research it and get to the bottom of it. And a lot of it was based on, whistleblowers. Sometimes they disappear. But this is the first time you have this level of credibility all the way to these government figures. So in the big scheme of things, if you look as well over the last 20 years, you look at all the Marvel movies, you look at all the Superman movies and all the ones that want these superpowers and Independence Day going back to 1996. You see all this. It's just War of the Worlds kind of mentality. Again, a lot of the Marvel movies are based on that. So you come to this point where I feel bad for anybody under 25 because this is their world. And so if an alien ship showed up, it really wouldn't rock their world. They're like, well, what's big deal? This is what I know. But if you're over 60, this is where I've been finding in the church. Over 60, they're having a hard time with this.
Yeah.
Because they can't conceive of biologics. What are you talking about? They don't know about Genesis 6. So it's really rocking their world. So why now? Well, time is getting close. I think the final unveiling and exactly how the scenario plays out. Is it going to be a blue beam type fake alien invasion? Is it going to be a real live, mothership there with entities? Again, in the film, I think I mentioned it, that George Bush Sr. told the guy that when a CIA director, that 3 UFOs appeared at this base. One of them came down, an entity came out and was talking to the uniformed soldiers. So that was again, there was no war, but they were in contact. So here's George Bush Sr., and when he asked further about it, they said, you don't need to know. So that's really, imagine just that story at face value would be very hard for a Christian that doesn't understand the things that we do, which, again, the prophecy world, we talk about fringe things, but this world is very, very small. It's a very small niche. So look at our other true brothers and sisters in Christ, who maybe they're not dispensational, they don't read any of this, and they see this film. They're not going to be able to talk about cognitive dissonance. They're not going to be able to process this.
Yeah. And it's what was fascinating to me about this is also kind of the emphasis on the fact that the Vatican knows a lot of this stuff, and the Vatican is tied in with all this stuff. And that to me lends credibility that the Vatican, the Roman Catholic system, is somehow going to be tied in with the final world religion. And I can't help but feel like, why now? Why all this stuff is coming out now is that, like you said, we're close to the end. I think Satan is up in his game, and he's going to have some type of global distraction that is going to immediately follow the global crisis, which to me would be the rapture of the church. So he's going to need some type of credible explanation to be able to explain away. And there's what better answer than this? Because if you go back to the quote from Reagan, Reagan stated that this is in 86 or 87 or whatever at the United Nations, that a credible threat from outside of the human race, outside of Earth, that appeared someday could unite all of mankind. And I think there was a lot of truth in what he said there. And so I guess this also kind of ties in with the next subject, with 3i Atlas. Why now? Why are these interstellar objects all of a sudden appearing out of the? We've had 3 since 2017 so far, and more to come. So why now? Why are these things just now appearing and doing the odd random things that they're doing, and acting in ways that seem to defy our understanding of the cosmos? And I fall back on the idea that Satan knows his time is short, and that he's going to start throwing everything he can out at the earth to deceive people. And whether I don't think 3i Atlas is necessarily a spaceship or anything like that, but I certainly don't think it's a normal comet. It's something, and we just can't. There's so many odd things about it. It seems to defy everything we thought we knew about comets and about asteroids and about just things flying around in space. And I chalk it up to that more of the deception going on in the area right outside of the Earth's atmosphere.
There's no doubt. I follow this pretty close in the sense of observatories, whether space and so there's no doubt. Even ground observatories, that we have far more technological capabilities with some of the new telescope observatories, like the Verisi Rubin. I mean, it's Verisi Rubin down in South America. It's gigantic. It's one of the largest telescopes ever built. But what it does is it's got like a 3 gigapixel camera. It's just incredible. But what it's doing is it's scanning the entire sky, basically like every 3 nights. And so it's looking for exactly what we're describing, is these newcomers or these interlopers, terabytes and terabytes every single night of information. So there's no doubt the latest dedication by the space agencies, whether it's Europe or America, doesn't matter, or worldwide, even China, Japan, they're looking for these things, anomalies. And so I think because of that, we're seeing more of them. But remember that this is only it's called 3i Atlas because it's the third interstellar object that's been discovered. That's it. It doesn't mean that that they've never come before, right? It's just we've never seen them because we haven't had the technology. So I think, though, the greater thing from this, Pete, is I do agree with you, but in no buts, I agree with you. The thing I find fascinating is that whether it's Avi Loeb or others, I have several astrophysicists, I follow them, and they don't agree. This guy hates Avi Loeb, and Avi Loeb pushes back, so it's kind of fun. These guys are these brilliant scientists, both evolutionists, both secularists, but they fight against each other. Okay, but the fact of the matter is, we only have 3 samples, 3 interstellar objects. So we don't have a huge sample of known physics that we can pull from for interstellar objects. The fact that it's going 150,000 miles an hour is super unique. And so in that sense, when these normal planetary astrophysicists, again, Avi Loeb is not a planetary astrophysicist, so this isn't his normal wheelhouse. So the other planetary physicists are going, look, there's a lot more similarities here, a lot more things that are not that unusual as it relates to comets. But granted, this is not a usual solar system comet. So we would expect we might learn something new from an interstellar comet, because I do think most likely it's going to be a comet, or it's really showing it with pictures. But all that to say, but the second thing, so you have that. But the second thing is, what I find fascinating, Pete, is what is this doing, this talk? And it might be, whether it's Oumuamua that came or the Borsov one that came, just in the past couple of years. Oumuamua had its own anomalies going way back, but it's shaping the culture. It's shaping the mindset of the social media, TikTok, Instagram mentality. It's training them to think in terms of how Avi Loeb and his Loeb scale. This is a mothership, man. It's amazing to me that he loves the attention. He's just an egomaniac, okay? And he's the Loeb scale, naming things after himself. But all that to say is that the bubble out there, people, they're praying to it, they're seeking it, they're buying it. Just they're getting like a fish on a hook. And so that concerns me more about what these things are going to do as it relates to the culture, so that when something finally does arrive that could be, again, a genuine mothership, they're going to be like, oh, well, we knew it was coming. Here we are. So this is part of the deception. It's preparing the mindset of the culture for the coming deception, which we know is guaranteed.
Yeah. So I think with Three Eye Atlas, and even with the Oumuamua and Borisov, the thing that I find fascinating is that these things are supposedly coming from, well, at least with Three Eye Atlas, I wasn't sure about the other two. The way that it's coming into the solar system here, it's coming from the direction of Sagittarius. Mm-hmm. It's coming into our solar system along the galactic plane or the ecliptic plane with very little deviation to the left or right, almost like a bullet, right? Comes straight in. And the thing that I find fascinating is that they're saying, okay, well, this is coming from outside of our solar system. Its travel must have began 1 billion years ago, or, 10 million years ago, whatever the number is that they're throwing out. Well, you and I would agree that the universe, at least I think we would agree on this, the universe isn't older than what the Genesis account gives an account for. We don't know. I don't want to go into the pre-Adamic world or anything like that. Like, I'm not saying that, but as far as what we know, the universe is not billions of years old. So in order for this thing to travel the distance that it needs to travel, to me, it could not have originated that far out if it was going under its natural trajectory. To me, it would have to be far closer, maybe the Oort cloud, right outside of our solar system. And then over the course of human history, it's been traveling in our direction, slowing down, speeding up, however God, or I don't even know if Satan is able to manipulate these things, but these things were set in motion a long time ago in order to arrive at this point in time in history, in order to achieve some type of intended effect, right? So why didn't these things show up in the 90s? Maybe they did. And like you said, we didn't have the ability to really track them. But I don't know. It just everything is starting to converge in terms of UFO disclosure, all this weird stuff we're starting to see in the sky. I mean, this here is a let me show this real quick. This is, are you familiar with the Black Knight?
I'm not sure.
So this was first spotted on the Earth back in let's see, back in 120 years ago, floating over the Earth, and it had some type of radio. They were able to bounce, this is back at the beginning of radio waves and sending radio frequencies and stuff out there, and they were picking up something from this thing. And about 40 years later, 40, 50 years later, when we're able to start seeing things out in space, just outside of our atmosphere, they discovered this thing. But this thing had been there. I think Tesla was one of the earlier guys to discover this at the turn of the 20th century. And it's just floating over there, and it's in a, I forget, what is it called when it's not going in the orbit of the Earth, it's going counter to the...
Oh, like retrograde?
Retrograde, yes. So it's a retrograde, and it's been there before we've had any satellites up in space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not space debris. It's been there way longer than
so why haven't we visited yet?
I have no idea. And so it is considered a conspiracy theory. But if you look up Black Knight, you can read the story behind that. But I mean, there's so many weird things going on around the world that, the Bet sphere, we finding like metallic balls on the Earth, like discovering materials. There was a mine in South Africa where they discovered where it should have been in the Precambrian, what they would consider the Precambrian era of the level of the Earth in terms of the layers, strata of the Earth. They're finding these like smooth crystal balls that have like engravings in them and stuff that way before any type of machinery would have been invented. I mean, this is going back to the time of the flood. We would consider this back to the time of the flood. So I would think this is kind of pre-flood technology that's discovered. Now, what I was mentioning earlier about how we have those two camps, right? You have on one side, you have the pure biblicist that says it's only here, and it's not even the things like things left unsaid, right? I did an article called Things Left Unsaid, or the things that left unsaid. And for example, when God tells Noah that he promises never to flood the world again, he mentions nothing about destroying the world with fire, Right. So in one sense, he's holding his promise true. He's not going to flood the world again, but he doesn't tell Noah that he's going to destroy with fire one day. So that's what I'm talking about. There's a lot of things that aren't mentioned in Scripture that that still will happen in the future. We just aren't told about them yet, right?
Yep.
And so it seems to me that on one side of it, you have the pure fundamentalist on this one side that refuse to accept anything outside of just black and white. And on the other side, with NASA, in particular with 3i Atlas, you have the hardcore secularists who refuse to believe in anything supernatural.
Yep.
Other side. And so the thing that really irked me about the NASA photo, we waited like a month and a half for this new NASA photo to come out, and it's just like a blurry fuzzy garbage. You've got backyard astronomers that have better pictures of 3i Atlas than what NASA gave us. So what is NASA hiding? Or do you think they have more information than they're willing to tell us?
I totally do. Based on, especially what we're seeing right now, we've seen some amateur, astrophotographers, and I've just been kind of lazy, or else I would take my own picture. But some of these scopes are, our scopes are very good for other things, but these are like 20-inch scopes, which are just light buckets. So we do not have one that big. But what these are good for is exactly that: very, very dim object, very small object. But they're providing some enough detail where they're able to see a tail on it, and even like an anti-tail. Well, that tells me right out of the gate, look, if a guy with a 20-inch scope in his backyard can get that level, then Hubble, which is a visible telescope only, can certainly get that much. And they make the claim, well, you know what, it's a little bit too close to the sun. Well, you know what? The fact of the matter is, the guy again down here is doing it, and it's 30 degrees plus away from the sun now, on its way to Jupiter. Now, granted, December 19th is coming, which is the day where a lot of the space telescopes are going to be directed that way. But still, I do think NASA's not providing all the information for sure, because there's other. I mean, even if you want to get rid of Hubble, there's other earthbound scopes that aren't 12 inches or 20 inches, but that are 200 inches, and where's that information at? There's no doubt NASA has the ability to photograph with long exposure like these other guys. So there's definitely something up.
Well, and just to kind of tie the two things together, when in Oklahoma, when I was giving my presentation, I showed a series of photographs that we'd gotten from the ESA, the European Space Agency, of 3I Atlas. And every one of those pictures, the image changes. The shape of it seems to change. It was weird. It's the weirdest thing to see. And I had about, 8 pictures showed there. And every one of them, it seems to be morphing or changing or whatever. And I don't know if it's picking up the gas clouds around it or what. I don't know all the specifics on it, but it reminded me back of like a lot of the UFO type stuff or UAP stuff we're seeing, where they appear as like orbs, and they seem to be changing shapes, or they don't have any kind of one shape. And I don't know, again, it may be the plasma filled around it or whatever that we're seeing, but like it's just everything around through Atlas seems to have gotten tainted with this idea of conspiracy, and NASA certainly isn't helping anything by puppy guarding all of the pictures of good, high quality photos of what it is. I mean, they could shut Abbey Loeb down right away if they would just release some like high quality photos and show exactly what this thing is and what it isn't. Yeah, but they're playing into this whole thing, and so it just perpetuates the conspiracy, and it keeps people we're just as confused, or probably more so confused than we were at the beginning of it. So I don't think they're helping matters in this regard.
And there's no accountability, when you have, again, you have the amateur astrophotographer taking better images than NASA. They don't care. They don't say anything. They don't. No one's holding them accountable. They need to be called into Congress and say, let me see if I understand this. This guy over here with his own personal telescope is able to get a better image than billions and billions of dollars. Come on.
Well, hey man, let's you got time for questions and answers?
Yeah.
Q&A? All right. Sure. Got a few here. Let's see. Thank you, moderators, for grabbing these, by the way. From NanaFan7. Question. Do you think these things above us could be angels at all? My ex-son-in-law believes yes, but I tend to think that they have more important things to do. I would say fallen angels, for sure.
I guess, well, man, I wonder what the context is of that, because the things above us, because what I hear, Pete, is that people will send me things, basically calling me a NASA shill, and that all my pictures are fake. And they said, don't you know that a star, and then they'll zoom in with some specific camera, and then it shows this thing, blurring and everything else. And they're like, that's an angel. And so they'll find some guy online, and he's showing with his camera, and it looks like an angel sometimes. And so I wonder if that's the way the question is, because the answers are those. I know in Revelation 1 verse 19 and 20 it says the stars are angels. That's very specific in the literary context of the book of Revelation. But I can assure you that stars are pinpoints of light, and that if you do put them out of focus, this is how you collimate your telescope and other things. If there's heavy humidity in the air, especially in the summertime, you can get a lot of weird phenomenons. But ideally, if it's in focus, a star is a pinpoint of light. You can see color though, for sure. And you could do spectroscopy on the stars. So do I think stars are angels? No. Do I think they're huge balls of burning fusion, hydrogen, and other gases? Yes, because you can prove that through spectroscopy. So, but I some people don't understand chemistry or physics in that regard, and so they're kind of basing that off of a YouTube video. So I don't know if that was the context, but that reminds me of the context of what I've heard before. That's all.
Well, I was going to read this from Ephesians 2 that Paul refers to Satan as the prince of the power of the air. And he says, and he made you alive and were dead in trespasses and sin, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience. And I think that that title, a lot of people have the misconception, if they believe in Satan at all, most people don't even believe in Satan, but like most people that believe in an actual devil tend to think that he lives underground in some type of hellish type environment. I don't think he does at all. I think he's sitting up in the clouds somewhere, like he is sitting above mankind, because he doesn't look at us. He looks at us like insects, like we're just things to be destroyed and tortured and tormented. So we're not anything special to him at all. But I think that he certainly is probably involved in some level to the deception that's going on above us. Hence the title, Prince of the Power of the Air.
Yep. Until he gets thrown out of heaven, right? His access to heaven in Revelation 12 is removed, and he's thrown to the earth, where he has great wrath, because he knows he only has 42 months. So he definitely has access into the heavenly places, as you just read. But that's gonna come to an end soon.
Okay, from Edward McKelvey, ever considered the Antichrist will be presented as half man and half alien, his blood mix being the mark?
There's a couple things there that are speculative, which I think are interesting. There's no doubt there's been some good concepts out there. Like, for example, Ryan Peterson, he wrote a book on the final Nephilim, talking about the Antichrist being a hybrid, based on Genesis 3:15 and other passages. I think he did a great job in that book. Others will make the claim that he might be a theologically accurate Nephilim, the final Nephilim, truly, again, Satan's literal son, like a Rosemary baby type thing. But he's going to frame it as being part of an alien race, and maybe connected to be the one that connects, again, like a panspermia idea, that the ancient aliens look. I mean, that's a very popular. I mean, it's got it's very successful. Okay, so the idea that we were seeded here by ancient aliens, and to have a guy show up on the scene making a connection between those guys out there and humanity, and being the tie together for betrayal. That's I wouldn't be. Is it actual real? I don't think so. But that he could present it that way in a very successful way, and I think the world would eat it up.
I think you and I could have our own version of ancient aliens. The only thing that we can't copy this is the crazy hair that the guy has, and I don't have enough hair to do it, and you don't have enough hair to do it. We got to find somebody with some crazy hair.
I need to grow it out.
Yeah, there, do a mohawk or something.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I agree. I think that whoever this final Antichrist is going to be, he may have some type of genetically modified systems or whatever, or tainted system, to where I don't know. I do think the mark of the beast does something aside from just the loyalty, swearing allegiance to the image of the beast and to the mark, or taking the mark and taking the number of his name or whatever. But I also think that there's probably some type of genetic thing in there, because if you look at angels, right? The reason angels have free will, like angels have free will just like humans. There's no mechanism for redemption for them. So when they fell with Lucifer, there was no way to redeem them, because Christ didn't become an angel to redeem angels. He became a man to redeem mankind as our kinsman redeemer. So when you read Revelation 5, that's that concept of the kinsman redeemer there, that's also found in the book of Ruth and in Leviticus. But I tend to think that whatever his mark is going to be somehow taints the people that take that mark to such a degree that they're no longer human in whatever sense that it's going to be. So From Beth, what do you know, Pete, about Trump's Genesis mission? Well, I know that he's going to, double down on his efforts to ramp up AI and to ramp up digital currency and the data storage, and really kind of throwing everything that the U.S. has into that, to that whole sector of technology. And I think the gist of, when I read through the fact sheet of it, it's really that they're going to really double down on these efforts to get to make the U.S. as the world leader in this, and not let China or anybody else get ahead of us in this regard. Are you tracking anything different than that?
No, agreed. What the key thing is there is the integration of all these various technologies, AI and others, energy and other things. And so often what we see now, competition is very interesting, right? Because competition, but it's very sectarian. But to have some sort of unified approach, whether you could mandate that or not, that private industry, that would be interesting. But as we know, like the Tower of Babel, when people are united, God said there's nothing that can be withheld from them. And so that's one of the things that's keeping things down, is everybody's going for their own agenda. But he's trying to unite it together in a unified, integrated approach, which I think would only get us there faster.
Yeah, I agree. From Jess Vicky, on the topic, real craft and real bodies, wasn't the fallen angel technology apart back when? Probably, I think, before the flood, and then maybe now. So I know you're familiar with one Enoch, and the idea that during the days of Jared, that these watchers came down and that they provided mankind with technology, forbidden technology, etc. Or you think that this probably is part of that same kind of thing happening today, with fallen angels crashing in an aircraft, leaving it there so that we can discover it and then reverse engineer it and discover biologicals in order to perpetuate this notion that we are not alone, that there's other civilizations out there. There's, in other words, they want to deviate from the biblical narrative of God, heaven, hell, final judgment day, etc.
Well, I think everything is up for grabs because remember, there's this conspiracy behind the scenes that I believe was Eisenhower that made a deal with the other group, the alien group, right?
Yeah.
And so, and like I mentioned earlier, with the George Bush Sr., where a craft lands and an entity gets out and he's talking to him. So it's not always mysterious that they're crashing they're crashing a thing. They could be handing things over, making agreements, giving them craft. It doesn't always need to be crashes. So, but what's the similarity? You have a similarity with a non-human entity like Genesis 6 coming down and making agreements and providing a certain level of technology, which is exactly what the context of First Enoch says, as well as in many ways the book of Jude and Second Peter in the realm of false teachers and teaching things they were forbidden to do, and that's the context of both Second Peter 2:4 and Jude 6. It's false teaching. Well, that's interesting because that's what the book of Enoch says. They were teaching things they were not allowed to. So the idea that these other entities masquerading as extraterrestrials or aliens from another universe or galaxy, but truly fallen angels in some form. We're living in biblical days here. I mean, why would it surprise me? It happened before.
Yeah, no, I would agree. From Monica, do you gentlemen think that all the alien, UFO, and perhaps even 3i Atlas could be a deception? I personally think they are some form of deception, that it's geared toward, on one hand, you've got the pure evolutionists who believe that don't believe in the Bible. They don't believe in the Genesis account. They want to find a explanation for why we're here, and the whole idea of ancient aliens, all that kind of stuff, seeding our planet, is very appealing to them because it gives them a narrative apart from the Judeo-Christian belief in heaven and hell, etc. So they're trying to find some other alternative that's why the multiverse is such a popular topic. That's why science fiction is the way it is, that, we can travel off planet, we can get away from this, universe or whatever, this galaxy, and go explore and expand and get away from the earth, because the earth is good where the whole of judgments is going to be, in terms of when you read through Revelation, the warning is to those who are dwelling on the earth at that time, the earth dwellers, right? So the fact that we're talking about moving off planet by the end of the decade, within the next 10 years, I've always wondered, like, God has got to either stop that from happening or return in such a way in a time much sooner, because if man's left to his own recourse, and that's why I don't think that we've got more than 10 years, 20 years, because we're looking at colonizing the moon, colonizing Mars, and we're getting to the point where technology, that's why everything Musk does right now is geared toward getting us off planet.
It is.
The Tesla truck is designed for Mars atmosphere, not for ours. His boring company is designed to tunnel, right? It's a tunneling company. He wants to be able to use his, what are those androids that he has? Those robots? Optimus, to send his load a SpaceX aircraft full of his Optimus little android things, launch them to the moon, and via the Starlink and Neuralink be able to control those things so that they can build a space compound for humans on the moon, and then use the moon as a launching pad to go to Mars. But if you've got people living off planet, right, then the judgments are for those people that are dwelling on the earth. Then it seems that's probably part of the reason why they're racing to get off planet, right? Because the judgments apply to those who are dwelling on the earth at that time. So I don't know. It seems that God's not going to let them get that far. And if we're that close, I don't know how close we are, but I think even NASA is looking at going back to the moon, right? I heard that somewhere.
Yeah, Artemis. Yep.
Christina Reese, do you think God can't tolerate sin because of his glory? He reflects his glory back onto us, right? And he shares his glory with us. So it seems like he can't or won't reflect our sin back. I don't know if I understand it phrased that way. We're image bearers of God, Imago Deo.
Read it one more time, the first part.
Do you think God can't tolerate sin because of his glory? That's the first question.
Well, God can't take. It's not necessarily because of his glory, even though that would be included. It's inherited because of his nature, his holiness. God is only good. There's no shadow in him. There's no darkness. So he can't tolerate sin because of his very nature. I think his glory is kind of a reflection, or maybe that's kind of interesting, of maybe a
characteristic of his holiness, his righteousness, his being, his essence.
His glory is one of those things that you look at all of his characteristics: love, joy, righteousness, all those things, and his glory exudes all those together. But I don't think it's not necessarily because it could. I mean, his glory is involved, so we can agree on that. But I think ultimately it's just his nature is pure and holy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is just the way it was written, but question: what's the latest on CI Atlas? Or maybe I don't know if it's CI Atlas or 3i Atlas.
Yeah,
more pictures. Is there another Atlas?
No. They mean 3i Atlas.
Okay,
but when you look at the comment, it has a C in it. If you look at its official designation, 3i Atlas is kind of the slang moniker, so it might have just conflated it.
Yeah, the thing I found fascinating about the anti-tail on it was the anti-tail. So if you think about, for those people that aren't tracking, the solar winds, right? The solar winds are what come out of the sun, and we see them sometimes in the form of auroras that hit the earth. So that's really parts of the sun that we're seeing illuminating the skies above in the northern hemisphere. But think about those winds. I forget who said it earlier. It was a good explanation, but imagine walking trying to walk forward into a storm that's blowing against you at like 400 miles per hour. And that's about the same level of force that's coming on these anti-tails. So typically anti-tails are not very big, but on 3i Atlas, the anti-tail is a million kilometers long. And then it had 7 other like tails coming out from all different directions. I don't know if it's because of the way it was rotating, but the tail itself, like the normal cometary tail, is like 5 million kilometers long. So the fact that it's still exuding anti-tail a million miles ahead of it is pretty fascinating in and of itself. Again, it goes to the nature of this particular interstellar object, because we don't fully understand the makeup. It seems to be not your traditional largely hydrogen type of, hydrogen and rock. It seems to be more carbon, and it's got the weird mix between iron and
Nickel.
Mm-hmm. There's so many weird things about it that, but again, it's not from our solar system, so who's to say that it's normal for wherever it's from, but all right. From Annette, question for Mondo. The Bible says we see through a glass darkly, like a two-way mirror or a thin veil. Have you seen evidence to support this? I have before. Thank you, my friend, and God bless. Have you seen the preternatural, the supernatural?
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm following that. Well, I think there's no doubt that, as we saw in 2 Kings, we discussed in 2 Kings 6, that there is something that is cloaking a lot of what physically exists, but we're not allowed to see. And does God allow people to see glimpses into that other world, or to have, again, the scales fall off, or the ability, like, I'll give you an example. Our eyes are designed to see the visible spectrum, 400 nanometers to 700. Well, infrared is, again, longer, and you go to ultraviolet or something, and it's a little shorter wavelength. So those are just as real. Again, you can have night vision or infrared goggles or heat sensors, so you can see these things, but you have to be in tune to it. They're just as real as the visible spectrum. So in many ways, I remember back in the 90s, where a lot of the old camcorders, they had an infrared camera on them, and people were seeing things in the sky. They were like, really, you were able to see craft. It was really fascinating back then. But if you looked at it without the infrared sensor on, you wouldn't see anything. So in that sense, I do believe, have no problem God allowing somebody, by his permission, to see certain things that normally would not be visible under normal circumstances. Yeah, of course, that's biblical.
Well, let me ask you a question then. Do you think that before the flood, that humans and angels commingled and lived in, like the people that lived prior to the flood could see into the spiritual realm a lot more clearly than we can today?
Man, that's a great question. To me, it would be hard to prove from Genesis 1 through 5, or even 1 through 6. However, the real question would be, what were Adam and Eve like in the garden before sin? Or, and certainly the word Elohim, when Satan said, Satan's talking to her, she didn't think it was anything, and you'll be made like the Elohim, or like the other non-human deities, is what the word literally means. And she's just like, oh, so to me, their abilities, and then certainly pre-flood, we know they lived longer. We know that animals were bigger. We know that plants were bigger. So could those other healthier things of our eyes, whether they're interacting with angels or non-human beings regularly during that time, would be hard to prove from Scripture. Even in the garden, there's a little bit of hint there. But again, I can't say it didn't happen.
I wonder if it's the pineal gland, that somehow that there was a change to that after the flood, or at least after the garden, that now kind of shields that from, because that's why people, when you use drugs, you're using hallucinogenic drugs, or you're tapping in, you're opening that stuff up, and are like ayahuasca and all that stuff that people are going on, and they have these really spiritual type of encounters with beings that they couldn't see normally, but now that they're taking certain types of hallucinogenics, it opens up that third eye or whatever, so that they're able to see into that world nightmarishly or good, bad, or whatever. So I think maybe God closed that off or shut that off, or somehow that for normal people but somehow the human mind, because somebody, I cannot remember who explained this, and it made a lot of sense to me. But people were asking, how could fallen angels mate with human women and then have this offspring? So you got to think about an angel, right? So what is an angel? An angel is a spiritual being that can manifest physically. So it can exist in two different forms, physically and spiritually. Spiritually is its natural state, and then physical would be an altered state. Well, humans are tripartite, or I consider us tripartite, that we're body, soul, and spirit. So we're also physical and spiritual. So there is a way that the two can be conjoined, which we see there in Genesis 6. But I wonder if some of that, what we had in the pre-flood days, was now removed from mankind, or at least maybe in the garden was removed from mankind, so that there would be a separation between the physical and the spiritual to a large degree. And I guarantee you, if we could probably see into that realm, we'd probably be terrified.
Yep. Agreed.
There would be a lot done in the world. People would be pretty much holed up in there.
It's good to be blind sometimes.
Yeah. All right, here's a good question. Jonathan Sinclair, is it possible that the occult Babylon working ritual performed by Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard opened the door to all of this alien stuff?
Well, I certainly wouldn't put it on any single individual or individuals in that regard. No doubt there's a lot of occult people out there, but Satan always has his priests and priestesses all around. And I just think it's much bigger than any two individuals. There's no doubt, if you look historically speaking, I don't think there's ever been a time in biblical history, again, even in Revelation 2 and 3, you can, where Satan's throne dwells, right? In Pergamum. I've been to the exact site. And so when you look at some of this stuff, the occultic world, again, looking in ancient times, you have it in Babylon, you got the magicians there, you got in Egypt there. I mean, it's just everywhere. And so to say that it was open specifically, that, I don't know. I mean, to me, that's a little bit limited. I think it's just much broader in my mind.
Yeah, no, I would agree. But I do think the timing is also weird with Roswell happening in July of 47. And then you had the UN vote.
Mm-hmm. November.
What was it, 242 or what was it?
Yep, 282 in November, yeah.
And then they voted for the partitioning of an Arab and Jewish state. And then you had so all of that happening within that very short period of time, that Satan was preempting, laying the groundwork for the spinal deception. So I do think that this somehow ties into the explanation in a post-rapture world. And I've read through all the government, not through all of them, but I've read through a number of these DIA or the National Security Council's 10-year predictions, etc. And they do them every 10 years, but I think you can access them every 5 years. So like if you're in 1990, they'll make predictions about what they think the threats in the world, what the world's going to look like in the year 2000. You're in 2000, they're going to look at 2010. 2010, they're looking at 2020. And they're almost hilariously wrong all the time. But the one thing that they all have in common is none of them ever mention the rapture as a potential game changer, global disruptor, etc. None of them ever talk about it. So I think when the rapture does happen, they're going to be scrambling, and they're going to be trying to find some type of an explanation for what just happened. And I think this all ties in with what we're seeing now. This is all kind of pre-programming us, as well as the 70 plus years of science fiction and occult fascination in pop culture, etc. It's been kind of conditioning us for that. What is from Roses Waiting for Jesus? What is the explanation for the sudden appearance of orbs and then the disappearance without a trace? I look back at what last December,
yeah,
and you just had. I mean, some of that stuff was drones,
mm-hmm.
but then some of it was just like bizarre. Like, I mean, you have one thing sitting stationary for hours and hours and hours. And then it just disappears, or it's gone or whatever. But I don't know any drones that could just sit there for hours on end without making any kind of noise, etc.
I think too that one of the things that we see over and over is, and they mention this in the film, is the idea of switching between a physical three-dimensional craft, whether it's a triangle or a disc, and then morphing into an orb energy. So those kind of things, again, if it's cloaking itself in that bubble, then it's just putting light out towards that circular sphere in its bubble, and that's what you see flash off here and there. And again, let's not minimize that there is, again, when you're dealing with fallen angel technology or even demonic stuff, there's a lot of ways that even a demon that doesn't manifest physically, at least scripturally, can still manifest things that is supernatural in many ways, including orbs or other things. So that, to me, we're dealing with supernaturalism, so the sky's the limit.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Last question from Squidopotamus. What is the benefit of keeping these things secret, especially if in the darkness will come to light?
Well, I guess it depends on from whose perspective. From Satan's perspective, there's always, C.S. Lewis talked about this, going back to the Screwtape Letters. Every age, the way that he describes it, you have to decide on your age, what age you're in or what location you're in. For example, if you're in the middle of the jungle in South America or Africa, you're already going to have spiritism there. So the idea of spirits existing or demonic spirits or the river spirit or whatever entities, supernatural entities, nothing's hidden. But in the secular materialistic West, it's very wise of Satan to keep that because they're very secular, they're materialistic. They're not open to the idea of a spiritual realm or an eternal realm. So for them, they'd rather see people not believe in anything spiritual, maybe, again, an evolutionary naturalistic explanation. So when you say secret, it depends on the perspective. And that's going to vary based on from whose angle.
Yeah. And we got to remember, too, that we live in the age of information. And right now, information is currency. So information like this, technology is where people are leveraging all their power and all their prestige and abilities to maintain control or maintain their positions of authority, what have you. So information right now is currency. Well, Mondo, I want to thank you for coming on nearly 2 hours. Thanks for going through the gauntlet of questions and just the conversation we've had. I mean, there's so much bizarre things happening out there in the world today. I mean, you've got all the stuff happening in the paranormal realm with hauntings and all that kind of stuff. You've got all the cryptid sightings all over the world. You've got all the UFO stuff. You've got the weird stuff happening in the comets, the asteroids, and the sun and the moon and everything else that's going on. So I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, I mean, as always, we're entering into the calm relatively before the storm. We know in Luke 17, you and I have talked about this, that we're running out of normal. And this is just relatively normal. Think about what it's going to be during that time. And as always, our goal is to help people to be prepared for the rescue, for the rapture. And again, our heart, even though some of this is very fun, it's interesting, and I think we should be equipped to give answers. The ultimate goal is that Jesus is Lord. He died on the cross for our sins, was resurrected to pay for our sins. And with him, we'll have eternal life. And so if that's not you, then the time is now. And secondly, if that is you, then what's the goal? The goal is to occupy until he comes, until he actually comes, and to watch, as he said. And so to me, all this is fascinating. None of this is surprising by any means. It's like we are the pundits until the day of the rapture. We're calling play by play as everybody's setting the stage for the big act that's coming. And we get to say, oh, look at what they did now. And look at that. So here we are. We get the privilege of doing that. We're a chosen generation that gets to be there. God has called us and he's equipped us and he's empowered us to stand strong all the way until the end.
Amen. And Squid, I got your prayer request. Definitely be lifting you up. She broke her hand in 2 places. So prayer for quick healing on that, as well as any other prayer requests, spoken or unspoken, on the chat tonight. I'll be lifting you guys up as soon as we're done here. But Mondo, thanks for your time. Look forward to working with you again in the future. And when's the next conference for you guys? When and where?
Our next one is for Prophecy Watchers is in June 4th in Colorado Springs.
June 4th, Colorado Springs. So guys, if you're in that area, start gearing up for that, because that's going to be a good venue. It's always a good venue with you guys. So
yeah, it's fun. Great time to be in Colorado.
Well, thank you guys. I will see you guys on Wednesday, 1:00 with on Pastor Gary's channel, Victory Church. It should be 1 p.m. and I'm thinking Central Standard Time. I owe you that. But if you go to his channel, I think he's already got the thumbnail out and stuff for it. So anyways, thank you guys. God bless you. Thank you, moderators. Thank you for the super chats tonight for those that gave. And God bless you all. And I'll definitely be lifting you up in prayer as soon as this is over with.